The 2020 Atlanta Falcons. Real garbage can of a season there. So, team with a ton of talent, and pretty widely known that they're really good on, should be really good on offense given the people they have there, and it was their defense that really created a lot of problems for them. Now that was true for part of the season, but actually a huge amount of their issues came from their offensive coaching specifically, which hopefully with them being so bad this year, causing them to move on from everybody, that is no longer a problem. But as we go through these positions, I mean, they're really still loaded, especially on offense. So we'll see how their new hire goes, but yeah, there's a chance that they get back on top real quick. So position by position, what do the Falcons have going into the offseason? At quarterback, they're fine. Matt Ryan is not going to look great in a subpar system, but that applies to whatever, basically every quarterback in the NFL. And this system that they ran last year, like really, I can't over exaggerate how awful it was. They constantly took really good players and put them in terrible positions to succeed, and they couldn't move the ball. But if you look at why, like I said, while part of it is up to Matt Ryan, and he does gloss over some easier throws at times, I think a much larger part of that was the offense they were running, was asked them to go deep all the time, and not deep in constructive ways, in opportunities that had presented themselves. Given whatever the defensive look was or some personnel matchup, anything like that, they were just doing it because they're like, oh yeah, we should do that this play. And when you do that a bunch of times and it doesn't work, you end up with a bunch of 3-and-outs, and then your defense is on the field for a million years. And when your defense is already bad, it just gets worse and worse. And that's how the Falcons, that's how they got the results that they got last year. Now, like I said, Matt Ryan, you're completely set there. There's been talk about them drafting a quarterback, and I get it, especially Matt Ryan's age, but the likelihood of them drafting quarterback, I mean, as good as Matt Ryan is, very, very low. He's better than a whole lot of people think at this point, and he still, if you were to give him, he has weapons, like I said, and he used them not awful, but if you were to give him any level of competent offensive system, the Falcons are going to get right back into a top 5 offense for sure. So, then the skill positions, the more, maybe most people's most interesting part. Oh, yeah, and Falcons don't have a backup. Matt Schaub, I think, officially retiring this year. Not that matters a whole lot, but at receiver. So Julio Jones, still super elite, top 2-3 guy in the NFL for sure. Is he getting a little bit older? Yes, but actually I'm not worried about him getting older. Now, his one real standout thing is how fucking fast he is in a straight line, right? But he's so smart, and as opposed to other big body receivers, so I do think are going to fall off. I cite Mike Evans a lot for that. I think Kenny Golladay is another really good example. Julio Jones is really good, actually, like legitimately really good at route running and being able to beat zone coverages and finding space and all that stuff. And he's still going to have that as he ages. So you still have elite play from him. Calvin Ridley showed, and I thought he was elite going into the year, that he's effectively uncoverable one-on-one. And that's been the case really since he was a rookie. But with Julio Jones being hurt for a little bit, and with them being more and more dependent on Calvin Ridley beating guys down the field, it did showcase his skill set. Now, do I think he could maybe produce a little less in a better offense? Yes, but that's not a dig on him. I think he's really, really good. I mean, he's a fantastic receiver, and he's better than most teams, the vast majority of teams, number ones. So you sit there, and I mean, Russell Gage too. Russell Gage is a really good slot receiver. He's not a product of the system. Again, that system don't create no products. It's garbage, except for trash. So Russell Gage fought through that and became a really useful player. I mean, he already was. He already was a really useful player going into this year. He's one of the better slot receivers in the NFL. He consistently, again, creates separation where a lot of other players don't. I mean, he's better than, like for example, I know I kind of cite teams that I've already talked about in these videos, but like a Christian Kirk, Russell Gage is miles better than that type of player. So you're set at receiver, and even there are other guys. I mean, Olamide Zaccheaus is fast, and not just fast in a that's all he does, but fast in a useful way where he can actually move down the field. Now he doesn't have a ton of sample size, but I'd be encouraged about him as somebody on the depth chart, and then Brandon Powell too. A guy who didn't play a ton and played more through injuries especially towards the end of the year when they were kind of throwing out their backups. But Brandon Powell's good. He's not great, but he can do, again, and this is something I always say, but this is important because this is what you got on a roster. He can do useful things. He can actually find space short, and he can get open. Christian Blake, maybe not so much. He's kind of the one of the guys that played late in the season who's just a nobody, but they're still set at receiver going forward. A tight end, Hayden Hurst, is he great? No, but he fits in the Tyler Higbee, Darren Waller, whatever category of guys who are athletic, don't create a ton of separation themselves, but when it's schemed for them, they can be really effective. And Hayden Hurst, misused in the offense, again, just like everybody else, but when you have a constructive offense, he's somebody who's going to be really good. And he's not super old at this point. They're fine there. Luke Stalker is getting older. He's their backup tight end. He's a good blocker, really good blocker, especially as far as modern NFL tight ends go. But he doesn't do anything as a receiver, really. So could they use backups there? Maybe. They also have Jaden Graham on roster, who looked okay at times. I would struggle to write him into anything going forward. He doesn't really have the athleticism to be super useful. It's not a scheme for him. It's not like he creates by himself, which means he's just kind of a zero out there. Now, he's not awful. He can be on an NFL field and your offense will do fine. They can't, just ignore him, but he's not really adding anything. So, yeah, the point is, though, at the skill positions, I mean, they have one of the three best receiving cores in the NFL for sure, and their tight ends are fine. And with the quarterback, I mean, they should be a lot better than they are. I'll mention running backs real quick too. Todd Gurley, I don't think he's washed up. I just think he wasn't all that great in the first place. Now, he was still pretty good, and frankly, he was still pretty good this year. Now, he does lack top end speed, and that caused a lot of issues. He did that on the Rams too, though, and maybe his knee injuries, I've caught up to him a little bit as far as the quickness goes, but I actually think he's fine, and he's not going to demand a contract unreasonable at this point. So if they bring him back or not, it doesn't really matter to me, to be honest. You could definitely do better, though. There are other guys. Brian Hill, man, he's nothing. He has a little bit of Leonard Fournette in him in terms of, given a huge straight line, he will run straight forward into somebody and hit them pretty hard. Problem is, just like Leonard Fournette, he'll go down when he does it, and that's not really a useful skill set because you know who else does great into gigantic open lanes? Every other NFL running back. So nothing there. Ito Smith, I actually think, is a little bit more. He can at least create some for himself as well as take advantage of those. He is a little weak, though, and I can see why his vision's not great. He has a little bit of a fumbling issue, so I don't love Ito Smith either, but they're fine at running back again. I think that's a team that could use one of these veteran guys, or if they just bring back Todd Gurley again. If their system's better, whoever plays running back in that offense would go crazy, and it's not necessarily dependent on their talent. So that's the skill positions. As far as the offensive line goes, another spot where it adds up to a pretty good offense, and it didn't end up being that way. So Jake Matthews, not a lead at left tackle, but again, you kind of run into a situation, this is like a lot of players in the Falcons too, actually, where it's hard to do better if you draft someone new. Jake Matthews, not great, and he can still struggle a little bit with elite guys, especially power guys, but he's athletic. He can stand up to most rushers in the NFL, including the real speed guys like Brian Burns in division as an example, someone he can actually compete with pretty well. And as a run blocker, if he's used correctly, he's still pretty good. And on the other side of it, the other side, Caleb McGarry, not a waste of a first-round pick. People have kind of roasted him a little bit because he looked real bad his rookie year, and he does still have some struggles. But listen, that guy, as a run blocker especially, is a borderline elite. He's really, really athletic. He actually gets into space and does things when he's there. There are other athletic tackles who will get into space and just kind of be there, right? And they'll still miss, but people are like, whoa, well, look how fast he got down the field. But it doesn't matter if he just misses his assignment. Caleb McGarry doesn't do that. He legitimately takes defenders out of plays, and they're fine there. Now, is he going to struggle with for example, like Brian Burns? Yeah, a little bit, but I actually think he can still get better in that respect. And it's not like he's a disaster right now. So, yeah, I think you're solid at tackle still. At guard, was it James Carpenter, who's just released pretty recently from putting out this video, who wasn't great, but again, people because he was a first round bust, in air quotes, people put a lot of the Falcons offensive line problems on him because he's a presumed weak link given his reputation. That's just not the case, though. He wasn't that bad. He wasn't great, and you could do better fairly easily. But was he a disaster? No. Was he the reason for their offensive problems? Absolutely not. He doesn't actually lose all that bad, all that frequently, and he can do some work, especially in double teams. And whoever signs him next, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on a better team, playing a decent amount of snaps. Now, is he great? Again, I don't want to overrate James Carpenter, but don't blame the offensive problems on him because that's not the case. If anything, Alex Mack, the center, was more of an issue. That guy has skated by on his reputation for a little bit here, more so kind of the opposite of James Carpenter. Now, it's the same thing where I don't think he's bad, but I need to fight back on the city that they still have an elite center or even a good center. He moves decent, but most centers in the NFL at this point do. He doesn't necessarily move better than any of them. And it's not like he like digs people out really well. In pass protection, he's not really elite anymore. That was his, I think, big thing when he came over to the Falcons from the Browns. But at this age, he's just not elite right anymore. And you can see him get pressed back in the pocket. He'll lose badly to elite interior rushers, and this is not a good thing, especially in the contract he's on now. Is it a huge deal? No. Like, can you live with him on offense? Absolutely, but he's not as elite as maybe they had even when he was earlier with the Falcons. Their other guard though, that's the major bright spot. Chris Lindstrom, absolutely hit on that one. He's really good. He doesn't even. I mean, he barely even has like notable flaws that I see consistently that I have to worry about whenever I'm predicting Falcons games. So absolutely good there. And really overall, with the offense in general, before I move to the defense, they're still set there. If they get a non-idiot offensive coach, they're set there. We'll see with Arthur Smith. I'm going to save my thoughts on him for more of the season predictions going into next year. But the Falcons should be fine on offense. And for the Falcons defense, so despite all the maybe excuses I made for them given the woes of the Falcons offense, they still really were bad, obviously. And that was characterized by their just weird faith in the worst players on their roster. Not that they had a ton to work with, but they really trusted guys who just are not good with large snap counts, and that really hurt them. So position by position on the defensive line, I'll get real quick out of the way. Grady Jarrett, second for my money, pretty easily the third best interior defender in the NFL behind Aaron Donald and Chris Jones. I don't think it's close. And they're set there. Nothing to worry about. He's still elite, and actually matters as an interior defender. Other than that, though, especially in the interior, Tyler Davidson, horrible. They've actually found it. So somehow the Falcons, right, managed to find the one position where it's borderline impossible to not get production, and they didn't get production there. Tyler Davidson is a non-mobile nose tackle who gets shoved 5 yards off the ball every play. Like, really bad. Now, I don't hate him as a person. I don't know anything about him, but as a football player, he's really bad. And for them to give him consistently really large snap counts is just a horrible idea. And predictably, it went awful, especially combined with the weakness of their linebackers in the run game, which I'll get to later. It created a situation where basically what you saw, they just got steamrolled by teams who could run the ball with any level of consistency. Other than that, they also have DeAndre Swift, who also not great, but he at least does fit into the nose tackle category of not getting rocked every time he's on the field. So that's one of those things that just they kept giving snaps constantly and starts to Tyler Davidson when they had DeAndre Swift, who, well, again, not great, is better behind him. Now, he was also, I believe, injured for a little bit of the year, but that's just a big mistake for them. They had Marlon Davidson, their second round, I believe, draft pick. Wasn't super impressed, unfortunately. I was actually going into the season hoping that I would see some for him. Now, again, he was injured for much larger than a part of the year. He was injured for majority, but even when he played, especially towards the end, I didn't even really see flashes of him being a super useful player. Now, do I think there's a chance? Yes, again, recovering from injury and as a rookie in an awful defense, it's a little bit hard for me to make an super early call on him, but most players I get a feel for pretty quick, and him, I didn't really see anything that made me go crazy. So we'll see, but not super excited. At defensive end, again, they're just giving snaps to players who maybe belong in the back end of NFL rotations, maybe, but for them to get large numbers of snaps is just bad. So Dante Fowler did not work out. He is still actually a decent straight line speed rusher, but that skill set just isn't that useful in today's NFL, frankly, and unless you're playing like some backup tackles who still really struggle with that. But if that's the case, there are other defenders who are going to do the same thing and be more useful elsewhere. So I don't hate Dante Fowler. I do think he belongs in NFL defense, but it should be as a rotational rusher. And the Falcons did use him that way once they realized that, but it didn't necessarily work out as far as free agency goes. I'm going to go to next. Steven Means. So I'll hit the high spot real quick. I actually think they have a little bit in Steven Means. Now, I don't think he's great, but he at least can play the run decently as opposed to most of the other Falcon edges that we're going to talk about. And as a pass rusher, he's not nothing. He's not going to consistently beat any NFL tackle, but it's not impossible for him to, as opposed to some of these other guys. And that is encouraging. So Steven Means, yeah, I think you're okay with him, again, in the back of your rotation as a consistent starter, large snap count guy, though. You saw what happens with the Falcons at the end of the year. Jacob Twody Mariner, not great. He had this one nutty game against the Raiders, right? But if you look what happened and the pressures I think he had maybe 1.5 or 2 sacks that game. It was Derek Carr. It was the Madden thing, right? Where you just run outside the pocket off the snap, and when the tackle's setting back for you to stay in the pocket, it just leads the quarterback straight into the defender. And that's what happened with him in that game. He's just not that good. He doesn't consistently beat anyone. He does play the run okay, actually fairly similar to Steven Means, just a little bit bigger. But if you're depending on him to play any number of snaps, your defense just very unlikely to be any good. So nothing there really. Charles Harris, they brought in, and actually as a former first-round pick, I thought he did. If anything, he had the most flashes of being able to meaningfully rush the passer with any level of consistency or frequency. And while it wasn't, again, nothing special at all, he always showed the technique to be able to do something, and maybe if they keep him around and he plays more as just a situational pass rusher, he can show some stuff. Now, they were using him sometimes as a stand-up linebacker. That's not going to work. Don't do that. And it didn't work at all. But if they do keep him around as effectively what Hunter Fowler is, I don't think it's impossible that he provides a little bit of production. Other than that, though, finally move on from Takk McKinley. Actually, similar player to Dante Fowler and Charles Harris. Really similar to Charles Harris, actually, given they're both kind of first-round, not great picks. But I'm fine with the Falcons moving on from him. I do think he's still actually okay talent-wise, and I do think he'll probably be in the NFL for a while still. But I can see why it wasn't working out there, and that's not the type of thing I'm going to criticize them too much for. One other defensive line I want to talk about, John Gaminski. There's 2 more, and this actually highlights again my point of them just putting their faith in the wrong players. John Gaminski, when he was healthy, played a ton, and he's just awful. He doesn't do anything. They play him as an interior pass rusher on even like second and long, like not even like true pass rush downs, and he never beats anyone. And he can't stand up to anyone in the run game, and he doesn't do anything productive for your defense. And they should have recognized that. He's played plenty of snaps for me to be very confident in that evaluation. But despite that, whenever he was healthy, he played a ton. And it was the opposite of Allen Bailey. Allen Bailey was probably the best defensive lineman on this team outside of Grady Jarrett last year. And while he wasn't great, he wasn't worth the contract he signed, blah, 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 all that stuff, he still should have been getting snaps over all of these guys, and he wasn't. Now, again, I don't want to go crazy with him, but I actually think he's still a marginally useful veteran. If he signs with the Patriots or whatever next year, or some team who's not stupid, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a useful player. Well, I can tell you he would be a useful player. So, yeah, the Falcons just consistently using players wrong. Shows up again there. At linebacker, they did find something in Foye Oluokun for sure. Foye, he is definitely what people like to call a playmaker. He does make plays, especially in the passing game. He is really fast. You can tell that he was a safety in college, all that stuff. And he's definitely something that I'm encouraged by going forward, especially in combination with Deion Jones, who I think the world of. Deion Jones is incredibly good. But they went a little bit too modern, because when you have those two on the field, and especially they played a ton of nickels, so when you have those two as your effectively only second-level run defenders, it goes terribly. They are both weak, and whereas at least Deion Jones has instincts and still fills gaps really well, and frankly can take on bigger guys, Oluokun can't. He really, really can. He'll get washed out very easily. He over-pursues a lot. Now, he does have highlights of like forcing fumbles, but don't let that fool you to think he's actually good on a run-to-run or down-to-down run defense basis, because he's really not. Now, is he the worst in the league? No, they're like rookies that still are worse in terms of mental aspects of the game, but Foye Oluokun, while I do think is really useful, especially in the modern NFL, he's not every down linebacker, and where I think the Falcons are still going to use him like that next year, that could create some issues. Michael Walker, their rookie, I actually thought he was okay, and he does fill a little bit of that role of a more run-defending, bigger guy who can fill gaps better. Does he really matter though? Did he show me anything where I'm like, yeah, you got something in him? No, I don't think he's a disaster, which, as a 4th, 5th round rookie, whatever he was, is probably all you can hope for. But I don't think you're screwed if he's on the field, but not super excited there. And the secondary. So again, The Falcons just using players wrong who are bad. AJ Tyrell, the first round pick, they hit that one. He's really, really, really good. Definitely excited about him. I'm not even worried about him going forward if he's going to be good or not. They got something in him. Isaiah Oliver, though, complete opposite. Absolutely terrible. Cannot keep up with any receiver with any level of even marginal NFL athleticism. And this whole, the memes about him at the catch point, completely true. The guy cannot track the ball, get his head around to save his life. And I don't even think, because I've heard people say, well, he gets there, he just doesn't play the ball well. He doesn't even get there most of the time. He's just really bad. Should not be playing significant snaps on an NFL roster. And I think the Falcons do know that at this point, especially. I mean, look, the difference between when they played good players versus when they played him, right? Because AJ Terrell, really good. Bloody Ray Wilson, when he was getting snaps, especially toward the end of the year, is a legitimately good player. He had a couple high-profile touchdowns given up, but they were either A, not as followed, B, great plays by receivers, or C, something that happens to every corner in the NFL, no matter how good they are, including, whatever, Jalen Ramsey. But Willie Ray Wilson, really, he should have been playing over Isaiah Oliver the whole year. Legitimately good. Frankly, even as a larger slot defender, when they were using him there a little bit, now I don't love him there, but they got something in him too. Darqueze Dennard, he worked out for them as a veteran. Now he was hurt a lot of the year, so that's going to color that worse than it actually was. But again, when he was on the field, he was probably their second best corner, maybe tied with Willie Ray Wilson. And if they bring him back, which I think they should, if he stays healthy, they really are going to get a lot better at that spot, because who was playing in his place when he was healthy? Kendall Sheffield. Oh, man. That guy can't function on an NFL field. Not big enough, not strong enough, and he doesn't make up for it with anything in terms of quickness or ability or mental aspects of the game. He's going to get burned a lot if he's on the field, and you've seen over 2 years that that's the case, especially that he does the same thing with Isaiah Oliver as being terrible at the catch point. So, at corner, they're fine going forward if they pick the right people, but they've shown that they really don't know how to identify even talent in their own building, so I wouldn't necessarily be encouraged about that. As far as the safeties go, again, their best player, Devontae Casey, legitimately useful as a deep center field safety, up there with the better ones in the whole NFL, like Marcus Williams on the Saints, any of those players. I really would put him up there. He's really good. He legitimately makes plays while liking and run defense a little bit. Not a big deal given the position he plays. And are they going to bring him back as a free agent? I don't know. He did miss a ton of this year with injuries. I know he's had some interesting on-the-field discipline issues, but if I was another team, I would love to have him, and I think they're probably going to end up making a mistake and letting him go because, like I said, they just really don't know what they're doing. There are other guys though: Ricardo Allen, Keanu Neal. Neither of them are very good. Ricardo Allen used to be good, but at this point, I think age definitely has shown to catch up with him. And while he's not a disaster when he's on the field again, he's a safety who they expect to play in the slot, who can't cover guys in man anymore, and he doesn't make up for it again in really any way that's constructive. Keanu Neal, I mentioned that the linebackers are only second level defenders. I did kind of gloss over him a little bit. Now he only plays 10% of snaps in any given season because of his injuries, but when he's on the field, he is okay as a box linebacker, but I wouldn't even go farther than that. Even compared to guys like a Jamal Adams obviously is a little excessive for that. Kind of comparing different talent levels, but these other box safeties in the NFL, I'm having trouble coming up with one on the top of my head, but can do better than him, even the position he's supposed to be so good at. He's not terrible. It's just he's not that constructive as a box safety, and he does still struggle in coverage, especially when they expect him to cover guys in man. So moving on from him probably, which is fine. They do have something a little bit too in Sherrod Niesman, who was somebody that I had gone into the later part of the season when he started to play, given their injuries, expecting him to be really bad, and I was kind of counting on that, and that did lead me to some wrong bets with them. And he's not awful, is just the thing. He's not great, but as a deep safety, similar to Devontae Casey, actually, I think they have something here. Now, do I want to play major snaps, especially at this point early in his career? Probably not, but he's okay. And then the last one, Jalen Hawkins, 5th, 6th round rookie. Whatever. He got in snaps early in the season. He didn't show to be a disaster, which, again, for a rookie at that level, some kind of all you can ask for, but not super excited about him. So overall in defense, they're missing a lot. Now, if they pick the right players going forward to keep on their team, as well as bolstering that with the right veterans, given that goes for almost every team, they're going to be okay, but I would have effectively zero faith in that. But, you never know. And they do have, with Grady Jarrett, and Deion Jones. They have some really, and AJ Tyrell too. They have some really elite players that they can build on. So the Falcons going to the offseason, they could get so much better quickly, but they got to know what they're doing, and I don't know if it's going to happen.